Have you ever felt truly alone? Not just lonely, but utterly isolated, like you're the only soul for miles around? That's what it feels like working the night shift. The world sleeps, oblivious, while you're awake in the darkness, and sometimes the darkness, it wakes up too. It's a different world, the night shift. The air feels heavier, the silence more profound. Every creak and groan of the building takes on a sinister tone. Every shadow seems to writhe. But I worked nights at the old textile mill on the edge of town, a hulking red brick monstrosity that had seen better days. The looms had fallen silent years ago, replaced by rows of humming servers in a half-hearted attempt to drag the place into the 21st century. My job was simple: monitor the servers, make sure everything was running smoothly, and call for help if it wasn't. The silence was the worst part. The old mill was a labyrinth of corridors and stairwells, most leading to abandoned floors with dusty machinery and cobwebs thick enough to catch flies. Every night was the same. I'd clock in at 11 p.m. sharp, the security guard giving me a weary nod as I signed the register. The air always felt colder in that building, even in the summer months, damp and stale like a tomb. I'd make my rounds, checking the server banks, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The only sounds were the hum of the machines and the intermittent whir of a cooling fan. Sometimes I'd hear the scuttling of rats in the walls, a sound that never failed to send chills down my spine. I'd try to keep myself occupied, reading or listening to music through my headphones, but it was hard to shake the feeling of being watched, of something unseen lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision, until the night it stopped being nonsense and became my reality. It was a Tuesday, I think. The nights all blur together after a while. The rain was hammering against the windows, the wind howling like a banshee. Even the servers seemed to be struggling, their fans whirring louder than usual. I was halfway through a paperback, trying to ignore the storm raging outside, when I heard it. At first it was just a faint scratching coming from the far end of the server room. I ignored it, figuring it was just a rat. But the sound persisted, growing louder, more insistent. I cautiously approached it, my hand hovering over the heavy wrench I kept clipped to my belt. There was nothing there, just the endless rows of blinking lights and humming machines. I felt a chill run down my spine. Despite the stifling heat of the server room, the scraping had stopped the moment I rounded the corner. I checked behind the other server banks, my heart pounding in my chest. There was nothing, nowhere that a rat, or anything else for that matter, could have hidden. I even checked the ceiling, half expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes staring down at me. "This is ridiculous," I muttered to myself, my voice echoing in the silence. I went back to my desk, trying to focus on my book, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rest of the night was torture. The scraping returned, fainter this time, but still there, lurking at the edge of my hearing. And then there were the whispers. At first I thought it was just the wind whistling through the cracks in the old building. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, swirling around me, murmuring my name. I tried to block them out, putting on my headphones, blasting music directly into my ears. But the whispers cut through the music, insidious and unrelenting. They were close now, right behind me, whispering secrets I couldn't quite make out. I tried to rationalize it. Sleep deprivation, stress, maybe even carbon monoxide poisoning from one of the faulty heaters in the old building. But deep down, I knew better. This was something else, something sinister. The whispers followed me everywhere I went. Down the corridors, up the stairwells, they were always there, just out of sight, whispering my name. I could feel my sanity starting to fray, unraveling thread by thread. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my things and made a beeline for the exit, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even bother grabbing my jacket. I just ran. I ran like the devil himself was on my heels, my blood pounding in my ears, my lungs screaming for air. The growl echoed behind me, shaking the very foundations of the old mill. I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps now, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. The emergency exit signs cast an eerie green glow, throwing long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. "Run!" they hissed. "Run before it catches you." Catches. I slammed through a door, my momentum carrying me into a dark, cavernous room. Machinery loomed out of the darkness, huge, rusting hulks that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. I ducked behind a massive loom, its cold metal digging into my back. I could hear the footsteps outside, slow and heavy, coming closer. I held my breath, praying that whatever was out there wouldn't find me. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Silence. Then a low, guttural growl sending shivers down my spine. The door creaked open slowly, agonizingly. I couldn't stay there. I had to move. Taking a deep breath, I crept along the wall, my back pressed against the cold brick. I could hear the footsteps moving around the room, slow and methodical, searching. I spotted a door at the far end of the room, partially hidden by shadows. Slipping through it, I found myself in a small office. A desk sat in the middle of the room, illuminated by a single flickering lamp. The footsteps were getting closer. I could see the creature's feet now, just beyond the edge of the desk. They were massive, clad in what looked like heavy work boots, caked in mud and something that looked disturbingly like blood. It paced back and forth, the floorboards groaning under its weight. Then, just as suddenly as it had entered, it turned and lumbered out of the office. I waited, holding my breath, listening as the footsteps retreated down the hallway. For a moment there was silence. I had to get out of this building. I crawled out from under the desk, my legs stiff and aching. As I stood up, my heart lurched. There, pinned to the office door by a rusty nail, was a piece of paper. I reached out, my hand shaking, and took it down. It was a child's drawing, a crudely drawn stick figure with a grotesque, grinning face. Beneath it, scrawled in what looked like dried blood, was a single word: nowhere. A low growl echoed behind me, and I spun around, my blood turning to ice. The creature was standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing an eerie red in the dim light. The growl ripped through the silence, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. My breath caught in my throat, my eyes locked on the creature before me. It stood between me and the door, a hulking silhouette against the dim light of the hallway. Fear, raw and primal, surged through me, urging me to turn and run, to fling myself through the nearest window, anything to escape the nightmare unfolding before me. But my legs felt rooted to the spot, my body refusing to obey the commands of my panicked mind. It took a step closer, and the shadows shifted, revealing more of its grotesque form. It was vaguely humanoid, but twisted, malformed, as if someone had taken a human body and crudely stitched it back together, parts mismatched and out of place. Its skin was the color of old parchment, stretched taut over bones that jutted out at unnatural angles. The smell hit me then, a wave of decay and rot tinged with something sickly sweet like overripe fruit. Its head tilted to the side as if studying me, its glowing red eyes boring into mine. I felt a strange sense of violation laid bare before this thing. It was then I noticed something amidst the grotesque features, something that sent a fresh wave of fear, colder and sharper than before, coursing through me. It was a necklace, a simple silver chain dangling from its neck. Attached to it, clutched in a hand that resembled a claw more than anything human, was a small, framed photograph. The photo was old, faded, but even in the dim light I could make out the image. A young woman, her face full of life, smiling brightly. My mind, struggling to make sense of the impossible, latched onto that photo. "Please," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. My throat felt like sandpaper, my tongue thick and clumsy. I don't want any trouble." The creature didn't react, it just stood there, its eyes fixed on me, the photo dangling from its mangled hand, swaying slightly. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rasp of my own breathing and the distant, rhythmic thumping of machinery. The whispers started again, but they weren't panicked screams anymore. They were low, guttural murmurs, seeming to emanate from the very walls of the mill itself. "Stay," they hissed, their voices raspy and cold. "Stay with us, forever." Desperation welled up inside me, a surge of adrenaline battling against the paralyzing grip of fear. I couldn't let it take me. I wouldn't let this place be my tomb. My gaze darted around the cluttered office, searching for anything, any weapon, any escape. My eyes fell on a heavy metal stapler on the desk. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I snatched it up, my hand shaking, the cold metal oddly reassuring against my palm. "Back!" I shouted, my voice cracking with strain. "Get back, or I swear—" The creature paused, its head tilting again, as if confused by my sudden defiance. The whispers, however, seemed to intensify, their tone shifting from a low murmur to an angry hiss. The air grew colder, the flickering light above me dimming further, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. The creature took another step closer, and the photo slipped from its grasp, falling to the floor with a soft thud. For a moment its eyes flickered towards the fallen image, a flicker of something crossing its grotesque features, sadness, longing. It was then I knew, this thing, this monster, it wasn't fully in control. Something else held sway here, something ancient and malevolent, something that fed on fear and despair, and I was drowning in it. As the creature reached down for the photo, its attention momentarily diverted, I saw my chance. It was now or never. Gripping the stapler in my hand, I lunged, putting every ounce of my terror and desperation into the blow. The stapler connected with the creature's hand with a sickening crunch. It recoiled with a roar, a sound of pure rage and pain that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old mill. I hadn't aimed for its hand, but for the photo, hoping to somehow use it as a bargaining chip, a shield against the nightmare unfolding before me. But the creature's reflexes, despite its monstrous appearance, were lightning fast. The photo slipped from its grasp, falling to the floor with a soft thud, unnoticed and forgotten in the chaos of the moment. The creature cradled its injured hand, its glowing red eyes fixed on me, burning with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even check to see if the blow had had any effect. I scrambled past the creature, adrenaline lending speed to my exhausted limbs, and into the hallway beyond. The whispers followed me, their tone shifting from an angry hiss to a chorus of panicked screams. "He's escaping," they shrieked. "Stop him! Don't let him leave!" But I didn't slow down. I couldn't. I could feel the creature's presence behind me, a wave of cold, fetid air that seemed to cling to me, slowing me down, dragging me back towards the darkness. I raced down the corridor, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for respite. The emergency exit signs, once beacons of hope, now seemed to mock me, their green glow casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed on the walls, like the grasping claws of some unseen horror. I could hear the creature behind me, its heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway, shaking the very structure of the old mill. It was gaining on me, its roars echoing through the corridors, each one closer than the last. I burst through a door at the end of the hallway and found myself in a vast, cavernous room. Machinery loomed out of the darkness, huge, rusting hulks that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. Moonlight streamed through grimy windows, casting the room in an eerie, ethereal glow. For a moment, I thought I'd lost it. The footsteps had stopped, the roars fading into an unsettling silence. I risked a glance over my shoulder, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was empty. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. I'd done it. I'd escaped. But the relief was short-lived, replaced by a chilling realization. The whispers were gone. The mill was silent, preternaturally so. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, watching, waiting. And then I saw it. A single window high up on the far wall offered a glimmer of hope. It was a long way up, but it was my only chance. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled onto a nearby machine, its cold metal slick beneath my sweating palms, and began to climb. A low growl echoed behind me, and I risked another glance. The creature was back. It stood in the doorway, its eyes glowing red in the darkness, its maw open in a silent snarl. It hadn't given up. It wouldn't give up, not until it had me. Panic surged through me, lending strength to my weary limbs. I clambered higher, ignoring the searing pain in my muscles. The window was getting closer, the pale moonlight beckoning me towards it. I was almost there when I felt something brush against my ankle. I looked down and saw the creature's hand, its mangled fingers grasping for me. I kicked out and scrambled the last few feet to the window. I threw myself through it, glass shattering around me. I landed hard on the rough ground below, the breath knocked out of me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not daring to look back. As I ran, I could see lights in the distance. Civilization, hope. I was going to live. The first rays of dawn found me slumped against a bus stop. The rising sun, usually a symbol of hope, felt cold and alien, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock my exhaustion. The city around me was slowly coming to life. People hurried past, their faces etched with weariness, oblivious to the terror I had witnessed. They moved like sleepwalkers, their lives a million miles away from the horrors that lurked in the shadows. I stayed silent, a silent observer, forever changed by the events of the night. They say time heals all wounds, but some wounds, the ones that run deeper, that burrow under your skin and nestle in the marrow of your bones, those wounds never truly heal. They fester, leaving behind scars that ache with phantom pains, a constant reminder of the darkness that lies just beneath the surface of the everyday world. I never went back to the mill. The thought of even driving past that hulking red brick monstrosity sent shivers down my spine, a visceral reaction I couldn't control. I tried to explain what had happened to the police, to doctors, to anyone who would listen, but the words sounded hollow, even to my own ears, the ramblings of a sleep-deprived, stress-addled mind pushed beyond its limits. So I stopped trying. I retreated into myself, haunted by nightmares, my sleep plagued by whispers and shadows, the lingering scent of decay and overripe fruit. The world continued around me, oblivious, indifferent to the terror that clung to me like a shroud. I tried to move on, to forget. But the mill, and the creature that resided within its depths, had left its mark on me, a brand seared into my soul. I was a changed man, forever marked by the darkness I had witnessed. I see them now sometimes in the faces of strangers, in the shadows that lengthen as the sun begins its descent. A flicker of red in the corner of my eye, the faint echo of a guttural growl, the brush of cold air against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. They are reminders, I think, that the world is not as it seems, that the veil between reality and nightmare is thin, easily pierced by fear, by despair, by the darkness that resides within us all. They are warnings, whispered on the wind, carried on the backs of shadows, to those who dare to listen, to those who know that the night holds more than just dreams. I no longer seek answers, for I know that some things are best left undisturbed. Some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed, and some nightmares, the ones that claw their way from the darkest recesses of our minds, have a way of lingering long after the sun has risen. So I keep to the light as best I can. I surround myself with the familiar, the comforting, the mundane, but even in the crowded streets, in the heart of the bustling city, I can never shake the feeling that I am being watched, that I am never truly alone, for the darkness remembers, and it never forgets.